Sean here from Precision DynoTech. In this video, we're going to talk about some more RevBench setup and settings. RevBench software is used with all of our data loggers, the DC1, DC2, and DC3. In this video, we're going to talk about setting up our gauges and all the sorts of fun things that we can do with our gauge view, our live plot, and our custom gauges. So as we can see here, we've got some movement on the gauges. I do have a signal generator hooked up to one of our acquisition units right now. And I also have sort of a fake load cell hooked up right now that I can manipulate. So let's look at our gauges right here. We can see that this gauge is actually, the needle is going off the scale. So how do we fix that? Well, it's really simple. Simply right-click the gauge, click Gauge Properties. And then here we have a few different tabs that we can play with, but what we're going to first look at is settings. So our gauge input source is the RPM of the engine. That's exactly what we want. Now, of course, we can change that to anything here in this drop-down menu, but for now, we're going to keep this set to RPM engine. We can name this whatever we want, so engine RPM right here. If we just wanted to get rid of engine, we can do that. Click Save. You can see it updates just saying RPM. I like to be a bit more specific, saying engine RPM, just in case the brake RPM is different. All right, rounding digits. So generally for RPM, you always just want to round to the nearest whole number. But for other values that you're displaying, you can, of course, change that to whatever you want it rounded to, up to three decimal places. So we'll go back to whole numbers, though, for this. Our range minimum, 0. That's good for, an RPM range for an engine. Our maximum, right now, we know that our max RPM value is definitely going above 9,000. I don't think it's going above 11. So let's put 11,000 there. And let's see here with our signal generator sweeping up. Yeah, let's look 10,800 almost. Okay, so 11,000 is good for our maximum range. And then we can change our tick intervals. So major, this means these major ticks right here with the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth. So we can change that, let's say, to 2,000 if we wanted for whatever reason. And we get this. I'm going to change it back to 1,000 though. And then a similar thing here for our minor ticks. So that's every 250 RPM. If we wanted to change that to 500, we can see what that looks like. We can see, okay, now we only have minor ticks every 500. Hopefully this is showing up in the screen recording. Or we can change it to 100. So now we've got 10 ticks between each major tick. All right, so next tab, we can go to Appearance. We can change our font scale right here. Right now it's set to auto, so that's simply going to depend on how big the window is. However, if we wanted to increase this, this is a percentage change. So if we wanted to make the gauge name 50% smaller, we would put 50 and then click Save, and you can see engine RPM is now about half size. I'll go back to 100. Same with the value display. So our value display is right here. Let's say we want to make that a little bit bigger. Let's make that 150%. And there we go. We can also change the colors. So if I want to make this red, click Save. There we go. And it's red. Simple as that. I'm going to switch this probably back to a yellow, though, for easy viewing. And gauge name and label. So right now it's set to blue. You can also change that color, of course. Third tab, arc colors. So the arc right here of this analog gauge, we can define the top of the green zone and the top of the yellow zone, and then the red will be to the gauge maximum from the top of the yellow zone. So the top of the green zone, let's say we want to change that to, 9,000. Click Save. You can see it goes up to 9,000. Let's say we want our yellow arc to go up to 10. Right now it's only going to 9.5. So we'll put 10,000, click Save, and it goes up to 10. And then we have red the rest of the way. If we didn't want any red there, we could simply just set this to 11,000, and it'll be yellow all the way up to the end there. I'll go back to 10 though. We also have a few different types of gauges you can display. You can display a digital gauge, and that simply just gets rid of the sort of analog look to it. And so it's just a number, simple as that. And then you also have, similar settings, rounding digits, just as before. We don't have any mins and maxes, of course. And then we also have a bar gauge right here. So if we click Save, and we have a vertical bar gauge. Right now we don't have any horizontal ones available. In the future I am going to add that. But again, if you look at the bar gauge, those settings used for the needle, the analog style, don't really work for the bar gauge here. So we can go in and we can change some things, change our major tick interval to 2500 and maybe our minor tick interval to 500. That looks a little bit better there. And same thing, we can change the arc colors just as we did with the analog gauge. And then, of course, the name right here, engine RPM, that's all very, very similar. So for now, I'm going to go back to the analog gauge, and we will continue on. So here in the gauge view tab, which is this tab right here, you can see we have 4 rows of gauges possible. Only row 1 is checked. If we wanted to add another row, we can check that, and it adds another row of gauges. So you can configure these gauges, and if you don't want to see them, you can simply uncheck it or recheck it, and those settings will stay persistent. And we can add up to 4 rows. Obviously, they get kind of tiny at this point, so just something to play around with, whatever works for you. Moving on, we'll get to the live plot in a little another moment. Let's stick with the gauges for now. So we'll go to this third tab, Custom Gauges. If we click on this, we have a screen where we can basically put our own gauges on in any sort of layout that we want. Let me remove this. So in your software, when you first install it, it's going to look like this. It says right-click anywhere to add a gauge, alarm widget, or logo. So let's right-click, add widget, and we'll add a gauge. So you can see we've got these white corners on it. That's indicating that the gauge is unlocked. We can click and drag any corner to increase the size. And we can also click inside to drag it around and position it wherever we want. Once we're happy with where it is, we can right-click, lock movement, and those little corners go away. And then now I can't change the size or drag it around. And then if you wanted to move it again, you can right-click, click unlock movement, and we can do that again. Simple as that. All the gauge properties are exactly the same as we spoke about in the first tab. Everything is identical there. So we can add another widget. Let's add one for, make that a little larger here. Go to gauge properties, and let's see, that was horsepower. Let's do torque of the engine, for instance. So we can name that just torque. Click save, and let's make that a bar gauge. Click save, and then right click and lock movement. There we go. So now we have a torque gauge. So you can add as many of these as you like, and you can always remove them. Just right click and click remove. Other widgets we can add, an alarm status widget. I don't have any alarms set up for the purposes of this video, but it's going to be a little widget right here that we can add various alarms, like oil temperature alarms, or oil pressure alarms, or coolant temps. A variety of things that we can define in a separate settings page. So we won't get into that right now, but this is how you would add those alarms to your custom gauge page. It's very similar to the alarm status area down here, but this is persistent no matter which page you're on down here. So now let's remove that. Another option, so we can add a logo. I don't have any logos set right now, so that's why it says no logo set, but you would set that in the settings page under miscellaneous and select your logo file right here. So once you do that, it'll put your logo right here, and you can drag it around, put it wherever you want. You can also choose to display your logo down on the bottom right in that settings page that I just had brought up. Anyways, I'm going to remove that for now. And then we also have the live plot widget. So this is kind of neat. It's a sort of a miniature version of our live plot that we'll talk about in a moment. But you can make it as large as you want. And you can select whatever measure you want. So we have engine torque. It auto scales depending on the min and max values that it sees. You can change the color of it right here. And if you right click, you can go to time window, and this is going to show basically how far back in time you're looking. So right now it looks like it's probably set to about 10 seconds. We can change it to 30. Right click settings. We can have some settings for the y-axis scaling. If it's auto or expands only, you can also reset that range if it gets all wonky on you. And then you can also add an option to have text in the background right here. So not only do you get the the actual plot, but you have the value, of course. So that's kind of convenient. You can change how many decimal places it rounds to and the color of it as well. And if you want to get rid of it, simply right click and click remove plot widget. All right, so that's our custom gauge window. That's pretty cool. And then we have our live plot. So this is kind of similar to what we were just talking about, except that it's a much larger view here. And we can set our time window right here. We can select whatever measure we're looking at. So again, torque of the engine. We can move our torque around right there. That's pretty cool. And then we have our value output right here for torque. It's at 133.5. And then we can change the color. This is just our legend. And we can also add another series. This series is going to add a secondary axis on the Y, on the right side here. So now we have torque right here, which is the Y-axis on the left, and we have RPM, which is the Y-axis on the right. So if we move torque around, we can see that they're independent of each other. We can increase this time series. Let's increase it to 45, for instance. So that's pretty neat. Again, you can change the colors and select whichever channels that you want. Right now we're limited to 2 series, simply just for keeping things clean, since we can really only have 2 Y-axes. I mean, you can add more, but it really just starts to get kind of messy. You can remove them by clicking the little X buttons right here. So that's pretty simple. All right, one more thing that we can do with our gauges is adding a secondary window. And the way that we do that is we go up to File, and we click Open Custom Gauge Window. And that's going to open up this separate window. And you can see it's basically completely blank, but this is the same as the Custom Gauges tab in Function. So you can right-click anywhere, add widget, and add a gauge. And then you can go to your gauge properties and do the typical selection of what you want to see. So for instance, horsepower, we'll rename it to just HP for the actual name. Rounding digits, maximum, tick interval. Let's see, we'll do, I guess 100 and then do 50. And then we'll close out of that. We'll drag it, make it bigger, and then right click to lock movement. Now what's really cool about this is you can drag this to another monitor. So some people in their shops might have a secondary monitor for, maybe visitors or maybe the client. And you can just put up, like one big gauge like horsepower, maybe put 2 gauges on there, horsepower and torque, or maybe RPM. So that's what's kind of neat about this separate custom gauge window. You simply just drag it off your screen onto your secondary monitor and go from there. But so that's just one more feature about the custom gauges that you can do. And then you can close it out and it will save your settings between when you shut the program down and open it back up again. All right, so that just about covers all the gauge settings, and that's probably going to be the conclusion of this video. If you have any questions at all, please, don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is Sean, that's SEAN, @precisiondynotech.com. And if you have any suggestions or if you run into any problems, please let me know. I'm always happy to add more features to the program. In fact, much of this newer software has had input from many of my customers. So I really appreciate that when anyone has any ideas on how to improve the software. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.